will start off with tossing it to Darren and letting him introduce who our Aperitivo partner is tonight.
All right, I am going to go as fast as I can because we've got so much stuff. Rancho's Cucina is the restaurant tonight. They are located at 3910 30th and University in North Park. They are so great. I love them. They've been there for 22 years, I think. Juan Carlos Moe is the owner, and he has this incredible mole sauce. I don't like mole sauce. I went in, they had 3 sauces. They had a green sauce, a red sauce, a mole sauce. I said, yeah, sure, I'll take it, to be polite. Then I ate it. It was the most delicious thing I've ever had. Somebody said, well, you have never had it done correctly because mole sauce is really good. Now I like mole sauce. I love this guy. Why am I talking about him though? He's not here. Why is he not here? Because he's really busy, because he's so good. But he is going to be supporting us for our after party Noches Mexicana, which will take place on opening night, 10/29, immediately following the opera. We're going to open up the plaza. There's going to be papel picado. There's going to be lights. There's going to be live music, mariachi, food, wine, everything. It's going to be so much fun. And not only that, we're going to have our artists, our cast, everyone sort of milling about and having a good time. So I think it's going to be really fun. That's what we're doing. And that's why I'm doing Rancho's Cucina tonight, because they will be there bringing us food. We have a whole bunch of festivals. We just had one, the most amazing night a couple nights ago. I'll let Andrea Puente Catan, my co-partner here, where is she? She is going to talk to us really quickly about these incredible festival things that we have going on. Andrea.
Programs. So next Wednesday, we're going to have a concert with 3 singers, Las Tres Fridas. Yesterday night, we had the film of Frida at Park and Market with Salma Hayek. We're going to have it again next week. And let's see what else do we have. Oh, and we have Juan Coronel Rivera coming to a very special place, Veronica Miguel Lev's house. So please come. It's going to be very interesting. This is Diego Rivera's grandson, but he's not only his grandson, but he's also a writer, a curator, an artist himself. And he's going to have a very interesting conversation with David about Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera. And there's going to be dinner and there's going to be singers. So you are very, very cordially invited. Gracias, Darren.
Dinana, we also have 10/12, the songs of Frida Kahlo, 10/18, 10/19, last 3 Fridas, Mariachi Garibaldi. What else? 10/20, in-person conversation with Juan Coronel Rivera and Roxana Velasquez, who's the executive director of San Diego Museum of Art. The list goes on and on. We're exhausted. We can't wait for November, but we're excited to show you all this. David.
Thank you, Darren and Andrea. First, cheers to anyone who has a drink. Welcome back to Aperitivo. This is our chance to enjoy the end of a day and before the evening and talk about what we do at San Diego Opera. So what Darren and Andrea were talking about very fast, because we're always on limited time, is a festival. And we don't normally do a festival around an opera, but this is a very important moment for us as an opera company and also as a community and also as a group of patrons of the opera to really understand the importance of these 2 artists and what they mean to us. And why do we create an opera about Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera? So as Andrea mentioned, Juan Coronel Rivera, you recognize that last name, is Diego Rivera's grandson. And so we have a glimpse into who Diego Rivera was as a real person, not as a story and not as an artist that we see in a book, but as a person. We have 2 opportunities to have a moment with him. One is a very private, beautiful moment with dinner and singers at a home. That's a private event. And if you're interested, we can absolutely invite you to that. But the other is a larger conversation with Roxana Velasquez of the Museum of Art, who, by the way, you may know, may not know, she's the executive director of the Museum of Art here in San Diego, is the person who has created the largest exhibition of artwork by Frida Kahlo that's ever happened. So she's an expert on Frida Kahlo. So it'll be a very interesting conversation. So these are opportunities for you to really understand how we frame the reality of these 2 individuals and their art that grounds you in the story that we're creating as an opera. But why we're here today is always to interview an artist. And who we have today with us is Eloise Kazan, who is our costume designer, who is creating the most beautiful, evocative costumes for this opera. And Eloise is here in San Diego already. This is a new opera. We're building, and we've designed, and we are building the sets and the costumes here in San Diego. So Eloise has been here many days already, and she's here for probably the duration. She's a very gifted designer from Mexico City, and I want to make sure that you all welcome her. You'll see her in the shot. She's in the costume shop already. So she's there watching things being built. Let's welcome Eloise.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm still here at the costume shop where we just finished our fittings for the day. And everyone, as you can see, is still very busy because these are some really, I hope it will be very fun to watch and amazing. And I hope we really indeed managed to do evocative and do justice to Frida, who had such an amazing sense of costume design. So yes, so here we are working on that.
That's a brilliant statement. Thank you, Eloise, because when we see Frida, we all know of what we think of Frida, with the flowers and the beautiful dresses and gorgeous textures and colors. And she costumed herself. I mean, she had a very conscious choice of how she presented herself as a person. So everything she did was very artistic. And if you've ever been to Casa Azul, which was her home, but is now a museum, you see her clothing, which in effect feels almost like a costume, I believe. And Eloise, you might say something about that.
Absolutely. I do feel that it's a costume in a way that I feel that every costume that comes near to being, an art piece is a tool of expression, a tool of self-expression, of communication. It tells a story. It's not just, a piece of fabric that you wear. And I think that Frida understood that very well and knew how important it was to express her identity, to express what was important in her life, to communicate with people, to travel in those Mexican fabrics and in those, they call that Mexican craft around the world when she was traveling in her dress. And I think she had that very strong sense of how costumes can really tell a story. And not only did she really take a lot of love and pleasure and put a lot of art in how she dressed, she also painted her dresses and her costumes, and not only in her self-portraits, but even the dresses herself. So she was obviously very conscious of how costumes can, provoke emotions and tell stories and tell who you are.
One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about as I've gotten to know Frida better as a person, not as an image, but as a person, through my many trips to Mexico City. And we just took a group of patrons to Mexico City a few weeks ago. I see Janet White on the camera with us, who's our board president, and she was on the trip with us, is, when we go to the museum and we see those costumes of Frida is exactly what they were. And they're not, we think of Frida Kahlo as something, the image that she's created is something that's iconic, and it is, but it's also rooted in the history and the people of Mexico. And Andrea talked to us about this. Some of these images actually come from Oaxaca. And so we think of these shapes and things that are in the dresses that are very indigenous in Mexican culture.
Yes, absolutely. And so I think I also love how she mixed it up, because I think she was very appreciated very much art and crafts from different parts of the world. So in her clothing, you can sometimes find surprising bits from India and from China and from other, folk jewelry and things like that. So I think it's also very interesting how she also understood that Mexico is part of this mix, and she made it, even took these parts or, bits of costume that she maybe got from friends who were traveling from abroad, and made them very Mexican in that mix. And I think one of the things that I think we're also trying to say in the show is how, that Mexico is not just one thing, it's part of a very important part, and why I'm trying to express also is the costumes, that mix that exists in Mexico, a mix of different cultures, of of how different periods of history left these imprints, and so that's what makes the so colorful. And I think obviously that all permeated the art of Frida, and she was very conscious of that. So I'm trying to, you know, be fair to it and, you know, reflect that in the costumes we're making here.
That's awesome, which gets us into a conversation about you a little bit. So let's get to know you a little bit better. Your background. Where are you from? Where were you born?
So I was born in Croatia. My father is Mexican, but my father was in the diplomatic service. And so until I was about 15, we moved every 3 or 4 years. And I was in a different country every 3 or 4 years. And I guess in a way that kind of made me be more interested in design, because every 2 or 3 years I would come to a place where I didn't speak the language. And I would sometimes really resort to communicating to drawings. And I guess that was the first part of, you know, just I would start drawing and, you know, trying to say what I was trying to tell, or, you know, just really tell a story to drawings. And I guess that was, you know, the first kind of my how my needs to express myself visually really kind of first came to be. But I also think it's interesting because I very much, you know, I did go very often to visit my family in Mexico. And my father's Mexican, but at the same time, I could kind of see it as an outsider, as a foreigner. So I guess, you know, I do think that kind of gives me an interesting perspective where I can sort of both feel as a Mexican and see things as a Mexican that saw them from when I was very little, but also was exposed to, you know, this many years of life in Europe and other places. And so I could see how, you know, that could look to someone who was from there.
It's great. I mean, that's a really interesting perspective of inside and outside view of Mexican culture, which is something that we are trying to honor as an American company, obviously developing and putting together about these two very iconic people in Mexico. So you, when you were young, you're in different places, you're trying to understand the culture there, you're sketching, you're thinking. Were you seeing yourself at that time as a designer, or just using your pen as a way to
I knew I loved drawing, and then just by accident, I got a job in for a theater company to take them on, you know, help them on tour, because I learned a lot of languages by the time I was 14, 15. And so I accompanied a Slovenian theater company to a tour in Mexico. And I guess, you know, then that really made me fall in love with stage and theater. And I just, you know, I was obviously the last one, the last runner in the production team. But, you know, it really, I just thought there was this magic happening on stage, and I really wanted to be part of it. I thought those stories were amazing, and I just really so enjoyed it. And I guess I fell in love with it, and here I am so many years later.
That's great. That's great. And so, and how did you find your way from Europe to Mexico, and when?
So you know, when I was about 15, my father changed his career and we went to Mexico. And then I started kind of living more in Mexico, but I did go to England to do my postgraduate course. So I studied first fine arts in Mexico. And then from fine arts, I again remember that period when I was working in theater. And in that time in Mexico, it's very difficult to specialize in costume design or set design. There were not many places where you could study that. And so I went to do a postgraduate course in England where I could do set and costume design, which was what I knew I wanted. So I did go a bit far again and came back to Mexico a few years later, you know, and started working.
So that's something that everyone needs to know. Like when we do a production, we generally have a scenic designer, a set designer, and a costume designer, and they're separate people, but Eloise is very skilled in both. And we're going to talk about her experience with us in another project in a bit. But on this production, you are working just as the costume designer, but you are working with a scenic designer that you've worked with many times before, correct?
Yes, actually, the very first opera I did in my life, which was a Macbeth, I did with Jorge Ballina, who's our set designer. So, and that was 20 years ago, actually. And yes, so we've done, I think, about 12 to 14, I don't know, shows together already. And I think that obviously helps in the communication and in knowing, being able to develop things and make things that work well together visually, because, you know, obviously we have to still make sense and know which part of the story each one of us needs to address, and then what need of the show each one of us needs to address, and we have to be very much in tune, and there needs to be a certain chemistry between the set designer, the costume designer, for things to really work, and especially the communication is so important. And I think that, you know, having worked on so many shows together obviously helps. Absolutely.
Of course, right. And so when we do a new opera, we have a series, for any opera, we have a series of designers, costume designer, scenic designer, lighting designer, sometimes other designers, video, but those are the three principal designers in this production, because it does not involve video or projections. I think it's very tactile, because we want to live in the world of the art of these two artists who were tactile. Their world was that. It wasn't video or projections. But we also have Lorena Maza, who is our director. And so she's the director of the entire production. And you all are artists that live in Mexico City. And how often have you worked together as a team? Is this your first time together as a team of 4 artists, or?
It's the first time we're working as a team of the 4 of us, but we've all worked together. I mean, not the 4 of us together, but I've worked with the lighting designer. We worked with Lorena before. Lorena has worked with Victor, so not necessarily on the same project, but we have all worked together. I also have done, this is my 8th or 9th project with Lorena, and we've done opera and theater together. We've done film together. So we've also done different media together, and same thing with Victor. So, so yes, it's been a long collaboration. That's
great. So we're talking about your sort of professional arc and also this team. What are some of the things that you might, we don't want to share images right now, but you just want to sort of highlight? What are the things that you're most proud of, besides Frida and Diego, which of course you're very proud of, but what are some of the things that you're most proud of as a designer that you've been involved in?
You mean, so aside from Frida and Diego, aside from this project?
Yeah, costume or scenic, what are some of the things that you've done that you're really proud of?
Well, I think one of the shows I really enjoyed, and I think I managed to get across what I was hoping for, is a show I did for the Royal Shakespeare Company, which was called The Soldier in Every Sun. And this was a Mexican theme as well, and was set in pre-Columbian Mexico. And it was about the foundation of the Aztec Empire. But we kind of wanted to do, a mix of times. So, and in some ways, I do kind of, I guess, in Frida and Diego in this opera, kind of referring to it, because I think it's what that it has in common, that need of explaining how Mexico is this amazing mix. And I sometimes feel that people just concentrate or focus on a certain part of what Mexico is and certain parts of our history. And I think it's very interesting, how Mexico at some point had a Maximilian Habsburg as emperor, or how, and there are parts that not necessarily everyone know or is conscious about. And there's this very European part of Mexico as well. And yes. I think that amazing mix is something I really love, exploring, and I think really is inspiring for a designer. And that's, so that is in a very different way, because obviously that show was centered on giving a Hispanic vision of that. But again, we mixed in a bit of times, and I was really happy. It was really a joyful experience. We had the time, which is I think all over the world, time is so precious when you're preparing any production. And we had a luxury of more time than usual. So that's one of the shows. And actually Jorge Ballina was the set designer as well in that project.
Oh, it's great. I want to do a little shout out, because you were involved in this recent, I don't know the name of it, but the competition and conference in Calgary.
Oh, yes, the World Stage Design.
World Stage Design. That sounds very important, don't you think? As our audience, they should understand that World Stage Design sounds very prominent. So Eloise was a judge, but you've been a competitor before.
Yes.
And you were a judge in costume design, is that correct?
Yes, but I mean, we did participate in judging all the areas, but I would kind of do a special review of the costumes. Yeah, but we did.
And I think it's worth our audience knowing who won the first prize in lighting design.
Yes, Victor Zapatero won the first prize in lighting design for an amazing dance project called Onfalos that he actually did with Jorge as well. And Jorge got the second prize for his set design.
So in this world design competition of theater designers from all over the world, our lighting designer won first in lighting design, and our scenic designer won second in scenic design, and our costume designer, who has won many prizes there, was one of the judges. So we have the best, most high-level designers that I think we've ever had in a production, which is very exciting for me, and you're going to see it on the stage. It's going to be remarkable. We're not going to show you a lot of the big scenic elements yet, because I want everyone to be awed by that, but we're going to focus on some costume designs in just a minute. But that's a pedigree which we really need to be proud of here in San Diego. I think you probably feel the same way, right, Eloise?
No, but I think it is really exciting. When I see Jorge's work and Victor's work, I'm really excited. And, you know, they make me want to, you know, they challenge me, and they inspire me, and it's great. I'm really proud of them, and absolutely. And I think generally in Mexico we have a very good level of design. It's very interesting. I think that kind of exposure to such, you know, amazing art and history, and, you know, just the colors of Mexico and the nature, it kind of really, you know, does want you to grab, you know, paints or draw something. So I guess that's why, you know, we do have a lot of amazing designers in Mexico.
And so when did Lorena, the director, approach you about this project?
Well, I can't exactly remember, but it's been a while now. So we've been talking about this for a long time, and you know, it was as you know, a long and slow process. So I can't be exactly, but it's been
several years, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been a long
yeah.
time.
So
Yeah.
that's a good lead in to what I want to share with our audience, is that, you know, creating an opera and producing an existing opera are very different worlds, and we're commissioning this opera. We're the lead commissioner, meaning that we have the driver's seat in making this happen between a composer and a librettist, and you have to shape it, you have to workshop it, and then COVID happened. So we actually signed this contract 6 years ago. It was my first year in San Diego that I committed to this project. But the project as an idea exists more than 20 years ago. And it died and was resuscitated, and it died again and was resuscitated. But it's a very worthy project. And we became the driver of the rock of this, of pushing it forward through a variety of things that happened from other partners that were involved, and they disappeared. And so San Diego became the principal producing partner in this. And when we brought, and Eloise was there was a meeting that I went down to Mexico City with the designers, and we pitched via Zoom, like we are right now, to the management team of San Francisco Opera, and got them to come on board. And when San Francisco Opera became a partner, it sort of changed everything. And but we are the lead, which is really nice. I mean, San Francisco is a bigger company, but San Diego is the lead producing partner in this, and meaning you see Eloise right now in our costume shop, the sets and the costumes and everything is happening here in San Diego. We are driving this project forward. And I don't want to curse anything. I'm going to knock on the wood on my table. But we have the Metropolitan Opera, Chicago Lyric, Austin, Atlanta, Cincinnati, Dallas, Houston. They're all coming to this, and the big one, of course, I just sort of passed by, but the Met. Oh, also, I heard from LA Opera today. So we have a lot of opera companies coming to this that want to see this production because they sense what's going to be, and possibly be a partner, possibly be a renter. Either is fine with us, because that means that this production and this opera is going to have legs, which is what we all want from what we do. So I think we're all going to be very proud. And I've probably not shared all of that with you, Eloise, yet, but
yes, no, some of this, yes. I have to say a lot of it was the first time
Yeah.
Yes.
No, we don't want to put too much pressure on ourselves, but when people come and they say, can I have tickets to opening night, and it happens to be the Met, you're like, oh, of course. No, you can't. Of course you can. This is a big moment for San Diego Opera. So I hope everyone will understand that when they see it. And we started off talking about this festival. We are really doing a lot more than we ever do with an opera. We're doing a lot of activity to try to really make sure that our community understands the importance of this work and the importance of what we're trying to do by creating this work. It's not just producing Tosca, although I love Tosca. We're creating a work that's meant to be honoring the community that we sit within, which is really great. Okay, I'm waxing eloquent here, so let's move on a little more concrete. So we've been working together for a while now on this, but we've also worked on another project. And probably most of the people on our call don't know about this, because this is not something that we've done as a staged work. But during COVID, our participants may or may not know, many opera companies started to move into the digital realm. So there are other opera companies. Remember, we did a drive-in or two. Everyone remember that, when we were that's what we did during COVID. We produced outdoors. Many opera companies didn't do that, and they chose to produce inside of an empty theater with artists on stage and no audience, but made a video of it, right? So there was this whole migration over the past couple of years towards embracing digital media in our field. And we have been creating, it's not finished, a very beautiful film, and not in a theater, a real studio film approach of an opera, La Hija de Rappaccini, the daughter of Rappaccini, who was composed by Andrea Puente Catan's former husband, deceased husband, Daniel Catan. And it premiered in its professional debut in San Diego in 1990. If Andrea, you're on, 1993, 1994, I don't know. But many of you may remember that. It happened at the Civic Theater, and there's a new version that is smaller. It has a much smaller orchestra, and we did the chamber version of this, but the opera takes place in a garden, and we made a film of it in the garden in Culiacan, in Sinaloa, which is the most, if you've ever been there, you're lucky. If you've never been there, you need to. It's the most gorgeous, evocative, exotic, beautiful garden. And so we filmed this opera in the garden in Culiacan. And Eloise was in addition to being our costume designer, was really the production designer. And of course, we're in a garden, so there's not much scenic things that happen in the garden, but there's interior scenes that we had to design too. And you did all of that. So let's talk just a second about that experience.
Well, that was amazing. And I think it's so beautiful. I think what also happens to all of us working on stage, that you take all this work and all this time and create something that unfortunately, it's ephemeral in a way. You obviously do their performances that we all are impressed by and may remember the rest of our lives, but it's also so great to be able to watch it again. And I think this is so beautiful that and as you said, what I really enjoyed about it is that it is approached as a film. And we didn't film most of it in the garden, but we built the whole set that was built in Mexico City in a studio. And so we also did some locations a bit outside of the garden. We did actually also design some parts for the garden and did some, we did bring in some furniture and did a tiny bit of building in the garden as well. But obviously the botanical garden itself is such an amazing place and has such beautiful settings it was perfect for Rappaccini, where obviously the garden is one of the main characters in that story. So it was perfect. And obviously I also know, it was a new experience for me, because I had worked in opera and I had worked in film, but never had put the two together. So there was also, many ways, I think, a learning experience, but it was joyful and and the music is beautiful. The setting was amazing, and yes, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to it being finished and going through the post-production. And
so, if anyone in our audience knows about film production, there are various stages, right? And so you sort of create the sections, and you think about making a quilt. You make things, and then you stitch them together in a way. And then, of course, visual and audio have to be stitched together in a way. And we're sort of in that place now. We filmed in a very, very beautiful way. And one of my big learning experiences of this, because I've never been involved in a film before, is I went down there to meet a group of donors that were cultivating from Culiacan, from Mexico. And we had an event for them, and then they watched the filming, and this happened to have been a night scene. So when you're watching a night scene and you're filming a night scene, guess what? When does that happen? At night. So we started filming that night at, I don't know, 11 p.m. maybe. And I left at about 4 a.m. because I had to I had to fly back the next morning. But I remember leaving the hotel at 7 or 8, and the whole crew was coming back then. So it's a very interesting world that we've entered into in film. And if you're making a film inside of a theater, you can, it's an artificial space. But if you're actually trying to make a film with exterior shots, it's a whole different world. And it's gorgeous. It is a gorgeous opera. I'm just going to give you a tiny second about what the opera is before I'm going to show you a couple of video clips. And these are not, they're not finished. They are not balanced with the sound. They are not color corrected, but it's a little bit of experience of what we actually did during those, when we did the filming. But yeah, this opera is about a daughter of a botanist who is trapped within a garden because she's poisonous. Her father has raised her among poisonous plants. So she is trapped within this place, and she meets someone who falls in love with her, and he sees her, and he's drawn in through a dream, through her beauty and her evocativeness, but also her sensuality, because she's actually part of the garden. And so we have to create an image of her that is fertile in a way that's like within a garden, right? And then you have to also marry it with the garden that we're in. So these are all moments that happened in this that were executed so beautifully. So Liz or Joey, whoever's doing this, can we show the first one? And this is a little bit, we have 2 videos now that are very short. The first one is about sort of the preparation of it with a little bit of the music, but you see some images of how the costumes came together and the makeup on the singers, and it's quite beautiful. I want to point out, if you saw our drive-in opera of La Boheme, the 2 principal singers in this are Josh Guerrero, who was our Rodolfo, the tenor lead, and also Andrea Carroll, who was Musetta. So we have those 2 in this film. And we also have these incredible Mexican singers that we're not seeing quite as much in these videos. But let's start. So beautiful. I mean, the music in this is so beautiful. But what I wanted you to see in this clip was we also used video in a very interesting way. There's a technique called video mapping, where you project video onto a very discrete place. And so we projected it onto plants in the garden. And again, remember, this is not color corrected or matched in sound or anything, but this particular scene is the dream when he's drawn into the garden, and the garden needs to be evocative to draw him in sensually. And so we created this way to, with video to make it just that. And it's so beautiful. And you see Andrea Catan and Andrea Carroll with that gorgeous costume where she's just like enveloped in the garden, which is really beautiful. Do you want to say anything about this, Eloise?
Well, yes, I think that as Victor Zapatero, who's our lighting designer, Frida, did the video mapping on that. Yes, I mean, it was really interesting because within the same garden, we had to create two very different moods. So we had the reality, and then we had a moment of a dream. So, and Victor really helped us, create that very different sensation of the same garden that we also filmed for the day scenes.
Great. So it's very beautiful, and we're going to show this to you all at some point very soon. We'll have a finished film project that will be shared with all of our donors. We're in the process of talking with film festivals, which is great. And so I think it's going to have a festival presence, donor presence. Many opera companies in the United States are doing this sort of digital world, but they don't have content. So we're actually going to try to sell it as content to other opera companies, which is really good. We have one more quick video from that, which is more about seeing some of the preparation, but also some singing between the two principal artists. So let's see that. So this is incredibly exciting. I know you guys are just getting a tease of it, but it's going to be incredible. I want to beg your indulgence here. We have the old San Diego Opera logo. These videos were made a few months ago, and now we have a new logo and all, but you get it. You get the sense of what we're doing. So now we only have 15 minutes left. Wow. Let's jump into the actual opera that we're doing, which is Frida Diego. So you're sitting in the middle of the costume shop where we're building things, and we have a lot of looks that we're going to share, but let's start off with just what you're next to. Talk a little bit about this.
Well, I just put here on the table together with next to me a few of my favorite pieces. So this is, I hope you'll have to show me. This is one of the hearts, as you know. This appeared in so many. This appears in the two Fridas, very famous painting that Frida did. But she did. So this is a very important image, and we did this heart with latex and modeled it, and then it's embroidered on top with beads, and it's going to be part of the costume. So that's one of my favorite pieces. Then we have this headpiece, which will be worn by Maria Catarova, and she is Katrina. And so this is all inspired by the pre-Hispanic images of Coatlicue, the goddess of the underworld. And and she has all these serpents also. So she has this headdress, and she has this all modeled one by one costume with all these serpents. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so all these were obviously handmade and painted scale by scale, and then obviously this will become one of Frida's stops. So this is one of those. This was this embroidery I had made in Oaxaca, which is the region where actually this type of embroidery comes from, and that Frida had a lot of those Mexican blouses from, and this was embroidered over there, so we had it brought over. So so yes, there's a lot of work obviously that goes into any costume, but I think this is especially we went into a lot of detail here as well, because I felt it was kind of really important to bring a bit of those crafts and things that inspired the art of Frida and bring them into the show, and hopefully bring a bit of those things that made her want to paint into this opera, and help recreate her world. So yes, so we have, this is also another costume, which is here on the, I don't know if you can see it. This is
Oh yeah,
the
yeah.
god of the underworld. So he's on a, here on the, but again, it's, you know, it's very delicate fabric that we then had pleated and dyed. So it's a very, you know, intricate process that everything also kind of gets dipped and painted and textured. So yes, so it's a many level process. And, but I do hope it will help us, you know, really tell this amazing story and create a lot of amazing emotions to do justice to the music and to Frida, and do something that, you know, will make us all remember this and make this a very special opera as it should be.
Perfect. Thank you. So you've shown us a bunch of different looks, but we have, in this opera, we have two worlds. And I think people know this, but let's remind them. This is an opera about Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, but it's also an opera about Dia de Muertos, so the Day of the Dead. So we have these two worlds coming together. And if you know about Dia de Muertos, there's, you know, Mictlan, which is the Aztec afterlife, underworld, whatever you're going to call it, and we have Earth. And so we're representing in this production these two worlds with different colors. And so we have a lot of costumes that, we have a lot of characters that have multiple costumes. So we have Frida, that may be Frida in the sort of orangey tones that we see behind you, that's Mictlan, because Frida is dead, and she's asked to rise from the dead to greet Diego, who's living. And so that's the tone of all of the people involved in the underworld, the Mictlan. And then when they come to Earth, they're in these very earthy tones, very blue and
there's a lot of,
yeah.
So yes, we divide, I guess, well, the orange really came, I think it was a natural color for it to be for the world of the dead. First of all, because of the marigolds, and every year in Mexico at the time, at the Day of the Dead, I do feel the city and everything becomes a bit orange because it's full of those marigold flowers. Also, obviously, we all have these images of the cemeteries in the evening, and you have that candlelight, which is also kind of orangey. And I also, one of my favorite things, and is also these stories about how the monarch butterflies are the souls of the dead that come back. And so actually, this is a little piece of the fabric that we're using for Frida's skirt. And I don't know if that will actually be visible from the audience, but I love those little, so I'd absolutely advise that whoever comes to the opera brings how they call so they can see, but so because there are little details that, tell, another bit of the story, and there are a lot of little clues which can be discovered in the costume. But so Frida's skirt has these monarch butterflies, and people in the mountains in Mexico believe that the souls of the dead come back in the form of monarch butterflies, which a lot of them are also orange. So we just felt that it was natural because of the flowers, of the butterflies, of the candlelight. We just kind of felt that that warm orange color was the natural color for the world of the dead. And then the living, obviously, I guess that one of the things that inspired us very much is the color of Frida's house, that blue house. She also had a lot of those beautiful blues in her paintings, and we've decided to make that as the opposite color of the world, of the world of the dead, to have that blue for the world of the
We have the azul. If anybody's been to Casa Azul, that's sort of the living world. And then we have the beautiful marigold orange that is Mictlan. And I find it incredibly beautiful, but we've had to create various costumes for characters that go from Mictlan to Earth and back. And it's complicated and incredibly beautiful. But I think this gives us an opportunity, because we only have 10 minutes left now, to show some images from the production. So let's, I think Liz and Darren, you might show a few, if you want to give commentary along.
Oh yes, so this is the drawing for the costume I showed you, I just showed the headdress for. So this is Coatlicue, the goddess of the underworld, and she becomes the Catrina also in the second act in the Alameda mural painted by Diego. So it's the same character, but transitioning from that pre-Columbian, pre-Hispanic world into the world of the Diego Rivera mural. So yeah, so, and again, you have those oranges that we talked about. And
we know, those of us that know anything about Dia de Muertos, so Katrina is a very important character, but we think of her almost intercessor, maybe is not the right word, but Diego approaches Katrina to ask for the soul of Frida to help come back to welcome him to death, really. And those of us that were in Mexico City recently, we see this image, and Eloise, after we were there, we're like, oh my God, you copied this image so beautifully of a statue that's in the Anthropological Museum in Mexico City with the hands to the side and the snakes. This is an exact replica of a moment in Aztec culture that is beautifully rendered.
So yeah, so I tried obviously to be very respectful to all the parts, that all the symbolic, the hands, the snakes, you know, to have everything that makes Huatlic recognizable to Mexicans, and yes, convert it into a costume, and yes, there we are.
Great. Let's look at the next one.
So yeah, this is a snapshot, because I think another interesting thing is that obviously, you know, this is the world of the dead, and the dead have died in different periods. So the world of the dead has from characters from the conquest of Mexico. So you have some Spaniards, you have those two characters, a character on the right, which is Soldadera from the Mexican Revolution. You have two Hispanic characters. Then you have late 19th century. So it's a mix of different times in Mexico.
But in those tones that are Mictlan, so it's the world of the dead. So
exactly.
The oranges and the browns, and this is one tone of one world in the opera. Let's look at the next slide.
Yes, and this is Frida in that world. Exactly, this is her costume as she's departed soul.
So this is the beginning of the opera. Frida is in Mictlan. She's dead. Katrina asks her to come to Earth, and she's a little dismissive. She says, why should I go back to Earth? My life was full of pain from Diego, and also my physical pain. So what's the point of me going back? But this is what we see her in our sort of our first view of Frida. Next.
So yeah, so this was obviously inspired by the two Fridas, and this is a costume. So we'll have, and this is the heart I just showed you, will be used in this costume, and we have the arrows and yes, everything. But it was, you know, it's obviously slight, you know, an interpretation of the painting of Frida. But this was really exciting for me. This is one of my favorite pieces.
And Eloise has done a very beautiful job of taking these costumes that happen throughout the opera as actual reflections of the work of Frida Kahlo. So this is a very important image that we see in her art. So we don't see the paintings of Frida, but we see as Frida represented in those paintings, which I find incredibly beautiful. Next.
Yes, and obviously we have all these images that you'll see. You can go to the next one. But obviously, unfortunately, Frida's life was pain was always present in Frida's life. Firstly, obviously, because of the accident she had so many health issues, and we felt that it was very important to you know, tell that part of the story also in the costume. So, for example, this costume is we call it here in the workshop the plaster corset costume. Frida had to wear a plaster corset for a period in her life because of all her problems that were left after the accident. And she kind of began painting also because of having been bedridden. And I wanted to have this costume where she's really kind of creating and painting the costume and writing her diary onto that costume. So this costume has these bits of sketches of, you know, we made obviously a reinterpretation of what, you know, Frida's trying to do it in her style, but it's all the sketches and her diary converted into a costume.
It's beautiful. Next. Do you want to talk about this, Eloise?
Yes, this is based on the Tijuana costume, which is from the Oaxaca part. And obviously, as this is an opera and everything, we have this in the painting, that very famous image of Diego in between her brows, but we obviously made it bigger so you can kind of read it, see it. But I thought it was very interesting how and we're making also this will be worn by a singer, so we also, as you can imagine, it's quite a tricky job to be able to sing having such a big headdress and everything. Right. So it's a lot, but it's looking amazing, and I'm really happy with this one. So this is also...
and the ribbons, the red ribbons.
Yes, the red ribbons, which now this is a symbol that appeared in a lot of Frida's painting, which were the ribbons that represent the blood and the ties, the family ties, the things. But obviously, again, it comes back also to this idea of pain. And we will have an image that kind of relates and talks about this. But yes, but the ribbons are also an important leitmotif that appears in the opera.
Pain is a big message in this opera, because that's how Frida saw herself, right? She represented herself as an artist always through seeing her pain.
Yes, and I think that what's beautiful and what I always find really moving about Frida's story is how she used her art to really overcome that pain and to express herself even when she was bedridden, and to be able to communicate with the world. And that's one, I think we all can identify with that side of Frida, of having that need. And, those ribbons were the pain, but you still want to communicate. You feel that tie with your family. And so it's that mix of a symbol in between the ties, the blood, the pain, but at the same time, that need to keep those ties live with your family and with your identity.
It's beautiful. Next. You want to mention this? This is obviously a different tone, right? Different
yes,
color.
This is this is Frida when she comes back to the world of the living, and she regains, she for a moment regains all those colors that are there and live in her paintings. And this is, based on pieces that Frida wore, and again, mostly from the region of Oaxaca in Mexico.
And next picture. Oh, so this is actually a rendering of, I think, the first act. Yeah, so we get a sense of these two worlds, which is the Mictlan, which is sort of the orangey marigold tone, and the Azul, which is earth. And this is Diego at the beginning of the opera is approaching Katrina, which you see Diego on maybe the second level from the top, and Katrina below, asking for Frida to come back. But this is during the Dia de Muertos, and we see lots of candles and marigolds, but you see the shape of the production in this.
Next. Yeah, and one of the things I love about Jorge's design, you can go on to the next, but it's also that we kind of, even that he incorporated that pyramidal structure, and and Frida also had that pyramid in her house. That
exactly. And for those of you that have been to Casa Azul, these are very clear images from Frida's house at Casa Azul. The doors, the easel, the wheelchair, Frida, Diego, it's all there, and it's very beautiful.
Oh, and that's the god of the underworld, Mictlantecutli. And again, this was really based on sculptures that you can see in the Anthropology Museum in Mexico, and there's this exposed heart. But I thought it was really interesting because he has in all the representation this image of the blood coming out of the heart, and I thought it was always interesting. And I was always wondering if Frida actually saw some of these images and how those inspired her. Those threads and ribbons that come out of the heart. And I thought it was really interesting, and really we not only wanted to bring, things, but things that were present in Frida's life or her art or her costumes, but we also wanted to show a bit of what inspired her art. And I think this was really interesting. This is one of those pieces that I looked at, and when I looked at it more carefully, I was like, Frida must have been inspired also by all this, this representation of the blood coming out of the heart. And all these little skulls, which are also going to again represent all those souls of the dead, that are together with him in the underworld.
So I think we're close to the end. Only one other thing I want to say, which was something, someone asked about nibbles provided. What night are the nibbles provided? So we're going to have, normally what we do at an opera in the main stage is that we do opening night, especially if it's a first opera, we do a pre-performance reception with certain donors and elected officials, and then we have the performance, and then intermission with donors in the patron lounge, and then afterwards we have a cast party, because you need to do that for the cast, and you need to do it for donors. So that's what we typically do for every opera. But for opening night of Frida, we are replacing the cast party. So those of you that want something very private, I hope you're not disappointed. But what we're trying to do is actually build a big event for anybody that has a ticket that comes to the opening night of Frida. We'll have food and drink and music and an Altar De Muertos. So it's a beautiful altar for people. And Andrea, if you're still on the call, if you want to talk a little bit about that, but it's actually building the context of the celebration.
Yeah, I'm here.
Opening night. Yeah.
So we commissioned an artist to do the installation of the Altar De Muertos. And, I think it was very, very important to whatever happens inside of the theater, that also happens outside of the theater. So it's just like an imaging kind of thing. So we're going to have the Altar De Muertos, which some of you have seen it, seen Altares, which is kind of like a 4-stage mini pyramid where it's full of flowers and candles and pictures of your loved ones that have left this world. And it's a rendition and a place where we honor our loved ones. So we're gonna have it for everybody. Everybody can come and see it. And actually we have this idea of each one of you bringing a picture of a loved person that is no longer with us, and we're gonna put it there so we also remember them, even though we don't know them, but it's just it's part of the tradition.
And before we end, we're over, but I just want to say the idea and the sentiment of Dia de Muertos in your culture is very different from what we may think it is. It's actually a celebration. It's not morbid or sad. It's more of a celebration of those we've lost, right?
Well, it's just another way of looking at death without being dark and sad and going down to a hole. No, this is a celebration with flowers, with light, with music, and a way of saying how much you appreciated the life of this person that was in yours. Yeah. So it's just another outlook.
So that we'll have that altar at each performance.
Yes.
But the big festival, the big party will happen after opening night. So if you want to have some food, nibbles, as someone said, and some drink and celebrate the performance, please come to opening night or come twice. Yeah. So anyway, spread the word. We're not that far away we start actually staging rehearsals tomorrow. We started chorus rehearsals last Friday. This has a very, very big chorus component in the opera. The chorus plays a very big scene in it. So we are just hitting the ground running, and we need your help to spread the word. It's a very exciting moment for San Diego, and more importantly for San Diego Opera. So please help us with this. And I appreciate you all coming. And thank you very much. Thank you so much, Eloise, for being here tonight and for spending your time with us.
Thank you so much.
All right. Gracias.